What's up, everybody? Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest, the Louisville men's basketball podcast presented by Great Flood Brewing Company. We are, of course, a member of the Field of 68 Media Network. If you have not checked out the absolute abundance of podcasts and shows out there, where have you been if you're a college basketball fan? So make sure you subscribe to the Field of 68's YouTube page. Make sure you follow the Field of 68 on Twitter. And of course, you know me, I am Jeff Greer, your host. We are joined this week by our producer, an absolute legend that is Jack Grossman. You'll never guess what we have to talk about. This is
your fatherhood.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we got two
Yes.
things. So, it's funny because Jack, I thought last week that we were going to do a podcast talking about Chris Mack's job status and what the future of Chris Mack and Louisville as a duo, as a connected group would be. And at the time, it would probably it wouldn't have been controversial, but it certainly would have been without anything other than everything that I have heard behind the scenes that the end of the year that Mack was going to move on and Louisville was going to part ways with him and probably negotiate a buyout. Those rumblings have been happening pretty much since the NC State loss earlier in January. And quite frankly, those murmurs were starting to happen earlier last year amid all of the other things that were going on. But then Russ Smith and I were able to connect and I had him on. So now we're doing it this week when there actually has been a negotiated buyout. If you did not hear about it, the way it was broken down to me was after the Notre Dame loss, which was a particularly embarrassing second half for Louisville. After playing well at Russ Smith's retirement ceremony, jersey retirement ceremony, getting blown out really in the second half and not playing any defense whatsoever. And then kind of getting thrown under the bus by his own players. Chris Mack apparently after that game made the decision that he had to get out of town. Not literally, but figuratively, move on, and that things were not going well. And so he made the first move, and the school and the coach met and talked over their buyout. I don't know if Mack was in that meeting or if a representative of Mack was in that meeting. I don't know how that all transpired, but at some point between the Notre Dame game and what we, saw the fire coming, the smoke and then fire coming with this buyout, a couple days later, Mack's offer initially was, I'll take a $6 million buyout and leave now. Louisville countered with closer to like 3.5, which is how we ended up at the around 4.8 million buyout that Chris Mack ended up with, which is a bargain compared to the $12 million buyout that his contract stipulated, which was basically either that amount of money or the amount remaining on his contract, the amount of salary left on his contract, which were identical. It was 3 years on his contract. So that's where that all of a sudden has happened. So we're going to talk about that today. And there's a lot to get to with this, as you would expect. It was maybe surprising, Jack, that it happened now versus at the end of the season. But what I have seen in Chris Mack, and look, I don't know Chris Mack as well as like Jeff Goodman knows him really, really well. I know Brian Snow, the former 24/7 writer, knows him really well. Jody Demling here in town knows him really well and has spent a lot of time with him. I don't know him like that. Those guys are like friends. They are friends. I'm not friends with Chris Mack. We are work counterparts, I guess. We had a good relationship. But I could just tell his demeanor has just not been the same. Honestly, for a while. It goes back maybe to the summer after the pandemic hit. It just seemed like things really had started to sour for him, and he wasn't enjoying his job. And we're talking about a guy, Jack, who at Xavier had things rocking. I mean, he had things rocking. People can have all this revisionist history. Oh, a huge portion of our fan base didn't want this guy. Nobody wanted this guy. Get out of here with that absolute garbage. You had a few prominent former players who are very vocal about their disdain for modern Louisville, for the current or recent leadership, and they have their gripes that I have no problem with. I don't know enough about some of their issues to weigh in or feel confident that I should weigh in on this, but that was a very, very, very vocal but very small amount of people who were talking about Kenny Payne, whose name will come up again later in this podcast, and everybody else on planet Earth either wanted Chris Mack or thought that David Padgett should be given the permanent job. There were no other. It was just like a couple people tweeted about like Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan is not going to coach Louisville basketball. I'm sorry. Let's move on from that. Chris Mack was the coach. He was the coach of the year, the national coach of the year. He was a hot name, and he had it rocking at Xavier. And Jack, his demeanor was kind of a swagger, kind of a tough guy mentality, loved talking trash, especially with crosstown rival Cincinnati. He was kind of prickly and just had that edge about him. And we just never really saw that at Louisville. It just never really seemed like he felt confident and comfortable acting like that at Louisville. So my first question for you, Jack, is as a guy who grew up here, I think stylistically, the fit just was not what it needed to be for Louisville. And as you know, as well as anyone, this city loves up-tempo pressing teams, or at least teams that play very frenetic defense and physical defense and create turnovers and run and play attractive basketball. And it just, the style fit never felt quite right, did it?
It didn't, but at the same time, if they would have won, people would have gotten over that very quickly. I think
that's fair.
To me, you talk about the culture and all that stuff and the pressing, the up-tempo offense, all that stuff. Yes, it's very true. Rick Pitino, who's the coach for 17 years before Chris Mack, and Denny Crum, the coach for 3 decades before Pitino. So you're talking about an almost 50-year span. They played up-tempo, pressing defenses, full court pressure, lots of athletes, exciting to watch, the doctors a dunk, all that stuff. That's all true. But at the end of the day, they were so loved because they won 3 national titles and went to 9 Final Fours in that time. I mean, so if Chris Mack would have had the success that he had in 2020, which of course, unfortunately for him, there wasn't a tournament because of the pandemic. If he would have sustained that, people wouldn't care about the pack line or how slow they played or anything like that. It comes down to, look, for someone my age, you look at, there's different generations of Louisville fans. There's the people that grew up in the 70s and the 80s with the Final Fours and the national titles of that era. There's the people that grew up in the 90s where they didn't win any titles, but they were still a national threat year after year after year, a bunch of second weekends. And then look, the first year I remember of Louisville basketball, 2002, 2003. Reese Gaines, freshman Francisco Garcia, Taekwon Dean, loved that team. That team made me love basketball. They were as high as number 2 in the polls. They did. They were high as number 2 in the polls. Ellis Miles blows his knee out. They're a 4 seed. Great team. They lost to Butler in the round of 32, but a really good team. They make a Final Four in 2005, a couple years later. You take that stretch of 2005 to 2015, which isn't the greatest stretch in Louisville basketball history, but the second greatest stretch of Louisville basketball history, where you go to 7 second weekends in a decade span, make 3 Final Fours, and win a title. Like, for me, growing up, I just expected Louisville to be in the Sweet 16. I did, every single year. Like, it was not a question of if they make the second weekend or if they make the tournament. It was, okay, Sweet 16, Rick Pitino never loses in the Sweet 16. You feel like you're in the Elite 8 every single year. Like, it's an insane thing to think back right now about how high the expectations.
But it's true. That's how people think.
Yes.
Jack. That's how people think.
Yes.
Like, the funny thing is that 2011 lost to Morehead State in I think it was a 4-13 game.
Yeah.
Is still talked to. It's like somebody's family member died for Louisville fans. It's like a traumatic experience that they actually were upset in the NCAA.
I can remember exactly where I was for that. I was in 6th grade at Mesquite Middle School, track and field practice. I was an absolute crap shot put thrower.
Love it.
And I was listening to Paul Rogers on the broadcast as we took laps around the school.
Oh, man.
And
That's
I
brutal.
ran back up into the room at the end, and I saw whatever his name is from Oregon State. I forget the guy's name. Hit the three to win
Kenneth
it. And
Fareed? Oh, the 3
well,
point
no.
shooter.
Yeah, obviously Fareed was the stud on that team, but
Yeah.
but the guy that hit the three for forehead to win the games, like, but yeah, even that year, I mean, that was the quote unquote bridge year. That was the quote unquote
They're
bad
a
year.
4 seed.
Is being a 4 seed, taking Kemba Walker and the UConn team that won the title down to the wire in the Big East tournament and being a 4 seed. That was the bad year, was being a 4 seed. So, I mean, just, it was never going to be that. And people talk about being the guy that follows the legend all the time. Like, Chris Mack was put in an impossible situation. But at the end of the day, I don't blame that for why he's getting fired. He's getting fired because you have those expectations. You have that set in stone to where you expect to be that good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take a little bit of a drop off on that and be okay. But you can't miss the tournament as a bubble team. And then follow that up with being 11-9 and 5-5 in a terrible ACC and being closer to the CBI than the NCAA tournament. That's not acceptable at Louisville. It's not. It's just not what the program is used to. That's not the standards of the program and what people are used to. Chris Mack is a really good coach. He had a great success at Xavier. If he decides he wants to coach again at some point, we don't know if he's going to do that at this stage. He could be a good coach somewhere else. But at the end of the day is you can't have those two back-to-back years at Louisville and on top of it have the Dino Gaudio scandal on top of it as well. But at the end of the day, it comes down to winning, and Chris Mack didn't win nearly enough to keep the job.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's going to be, and that's a very succinct way of putting it all together. There's going to be a lot of hindsight type thoughts on this, and that's fine. That's a natural thing. But,
I mean, you look at if there's a tournament in 2020 and he has a team that's going to be a 2, 3, or 4 seed.
You win 1 or 2 different games last year. I mean, there's a lot of it, but here's a couple of things that I would say. I will maintain that you are totally right, that the top most important thing was you got to win games at Louisville, and they didn't the last year and this year. Did he get dealt a tough hand with the looming NCAA, whatever?
Absolutely.
Absolutely he did. There's no question about it. Whoever took over was at least going to have to swim head on into a strong current in the recruiting waters, at least for now. COVID, obviously a huge factor, but other coaches have figured out ways to navigate those waters. You just keep looking at all the other schools that are dealing with the same FBI case infraction stuff, and they're recruiting fine, and they're competing at a high level. And on top of all of that, I think deep down, number one most important thing for how this arrived, they weren't winning games. Number two, the coach did not appear to have his heart in it in the last year or so. Something happened along the way where the side of Chris Mack and this side of Chris Mack exists, who would rather just be on a boat somewhere fishing or be at the beach or what. And we all have a side like that. We all do. I
don't blame him.
I'm not trying to be personal. That's just part of his personality. That's fine. But that side of him is lurking there. It's dude, you've made all this money. You don't need this. You don't need this experience where if you win a game 60-58, people complain for the next 4 days about the style of play until you play Duke. And then whatever happens in that game. And if you lose, people are all over you. It's high intensity. And it's not that I don't think Mac wasn't up for that. I just don't know. I think he kind of underestimated where the water would flow here. When you put your finger down on water flowing down a street and it splits in all the different directions, I'm not sure that he understood all the directions that they were going to go. This is a very complicated job for most coaches. Not a lot of people can come here and have success. The reason that Denny Crum and Rick Pitino, who are the two modern coaches that we can refer to, and I know there's other greats like Peck Hickman from years past who are great coaches as well, but the reason those two guys were legend Hall of Fame coaches and would have been strongly considered among the greatest coaches in college basketball history with just, and I'm talking mostly about Pitino right now, with just his time at Louisville. Just his work at Louisville, he would be considered one of the best coaches in college basketball. And Denny Crum, obviously, his whole career is built up as a head coach at Louisville, is because of force of personality. They enjoyed the spotlight. They thrived in the spotlight. They always left you wanting more, coming back for more. And most of all, they seemed to care more than the fans. And that's something that is, I think, significantly underrated about the experience that they had with Rick Pitino. You could talk about the headlines and all the things that happened in his tenure, all warranted. I still say it was warranted for them to move on from him. It had just become too much over the last few years. That being said, the guy, I think, is the best modern college basketball coach, purely X's and O's. If not the best, one of the top like 2 or 3. And it's because he is completely immersed in it. He makes incredible in-game adjustments. He game preps better than anyone. He's obsessed with the basketball side of this job. And I'm not saying that Chris Mack didn't care about that side. Obviously he did. He cares a lot about that side, but Chris likes having other parts of his life. And he made that comment, Jack, towards the end of all of this. I can't remember which game it was after, where he was like, that's all I think about is like trying to figure out this team. It's all I think about.
It was either NC State.
I think it was Pitt. I think it was Pitt.
Yeah.
So it just never quite was a fit. And sometimes that happens. So let's stop here, Jack, because we have so many other things to get to. But obviously the most important is telling our wonderful listeners that Great Flood is going out all season with their big time offerings that they have both in Middletown and at their Douglas Loop Highlands tap room during all televised Louisville women's and men's games. They're still going. They got plenty more time to take advantage of this. Our drinks are 10% cheaper for the entirety of the game. That's at least 2 hours of drinking that you can get in. This pricing is available at both our Highlands Tap Room and Middletown Restaurant. Like I said, we love hosting you and can't wait to root along with you as we cheer on our Cardinals. Thank you for your loyal support and go Cards. As a side note, we're now expanding our options in our tap room for the first time in 7 years, offering wine by the glass or a bottle, and liquor and cocktail menu will be coming soon. And for Sundays, you can enjoy at either location endless mimosas. So that is extremely exciting for me to toss that out there. We love Great Flood, that message from them, of course. And we also want to mention Bet Rivers. I know Jack is a huge gambler. I am not a big gambler.
Oh, yeah.
But
had that under in Louisville, Virginia.
I'm not a huge gambler, but I've loved the way that that the sport, I think, is getting smarter because gambling is a heavy influence in addition to analytics. The sport is getting smarter. So before we move on to the next part of this subject or this conversation, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now is the time. They are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. What sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. College basketball well underway. At this point, we're getting ready for March Madness, so this is the perfect time to get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You've got to be 21 years or older, and if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Jack, I want to shift gears.
All right.
So clearly, we've discussed how things didn't work for Chris Mack, and we've talked a little bit about the history and the expectations. I want to set the table here because right before we came on, Jack showed me a printed out grid of names with presumably
There it is.
a couple different details. I like how you blocked some of that out.
Well, there's some on it that I'm not supposed to make public.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do it this way because Jack and I have been talking about coaching carousel stuff since I've known Jack now, because I tried to give him as much IU coaching search scuttle as I came across. From my former life, covering college basketball for outlets, either The Athletic or the Courier Journal, picked up a few contacts in the carousel realm, as I like to call it, the industry sources, as some guys would refer to. And a lot of scuttle, a lot of gossiping goes on. And, a lot of the times it ends up being relatively true, or at least gives you some insight into why things don't happen. So I'm going to try to be the bad cop to Jack's good cop here with some of the names for Louisville potentially taking over. Mike Pegues, of course, will finish out this season as the interim head coach. And did okay as the interim head coach to start the season. They obviously had the bad loss to Furman, but they played well in the Bahamas. So, Jack, I'm going to set the table for you before you start naming your guys, okay?
All right.
Louisville is a top 10, honestly, to me, at minimum, a top 10 college basketball job, probably closer to like top 5, 6, 7 in the country. I know there's major blue bloods, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina. Duke is a primetime place, UCLA. We could talk about a bunch of different places. I'm sure I forgot one.
You forgot Indiana, Jeff.
Indiana, yeah. But I would put Louisville, Indiana, and those places, and like UCLA in that tier at this point. Yeah, it's like right, but it's like 1B.
Yeah, it's like for me, the blue bloods are Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, Carolina.
Yes,
and then
right after
that elites. You have
two.
the elites that are not the blue bloods, but are clearly their own tier, and that's where Louisville absolutely falls in.
Right. So we know that it's a primetime job in the highest TV rating market in the country for college basketball every year in and year out. People obsessed with college basketball. In a city that obviously is a part of one of the biggest college sports rivalries that there is, with Kentucky, in a conference that traditionally anyway is one of the best leagues in all of college basketball, if not the best. And on top of all of that, you have an incredible downtown pro level NBA arena, basically, that you can show off to your players. And they are guys who come in on recruiting visits are usually blown away, at least by the facilities, if nothing else. The practice facility is gorgeous and has continuously been updated. They're building the players' dorm across the street from it. There's just been a lot of incredible resources put in at Louisville to just keep up with the Joneses. A lot of schools have great resources at this level, and Louisville is certainly in that conversation. So it's a highly attractive job. You are, however, waiting on the IARP to make its decision. We don't know what that's going to look like, but with the new constitution that was just passed by the NCAA, there is language in that constitution that discourages infractions cases from ending up with postseason bans now. They would like to find other ways to punish schools. And I'm very interested to see how that structure impacts the IARP. The IARP is not obviously an NCAA organization. It's independent folks who were hired basically to be consultants in these cases and decide them on their own as independent adjudicators. But they do have a policy that they're trying to follow, and that's the NCAA rules. So we're waiting to find out what that punishment is. So that is the quote unquote dark cloud, the hammer looming over Louisville, whatever you want to call it. And that is the context of this job. Is it a great basketball recruiting, ground? Is it fertile ground here in Louisville? Some years, yes, some years, no. There's been a good amount of talent here, but Louisville is a national brand and you can recruit pretty much anywhere. So, Jack, hit me with your list. Let's get to it.
We have a large variety of names that may be more likely than others, but we're just going to go in alphabetical order, starting with Chris Beard.
Chris Beard, no chance.
Yeah,
has his dream job. His buyout is presumably
21 million.
Yeah, no chance.
No.
Zero chance. Let's not even waste time on him.
Yeah, John Beeline.
John Beeline, probably not. He's been out of the game now. He's a little older.
He's with the Pistons right now.
I know. Yeah, I mean the college game.
Right.
Would I be surprised by John Beeline going somewhere as the right-hand man of similar to the Phil Martelli,
like that, not at IU.
Yeah, I mean, not like terribly surprised, but I mean, John Beeline has been to Final Fours. I mean, he's been to national title games. So I would say very unlikely, but if they whiff on a lot of options, I would put him in the same category as, I hope that he's not hurt by me saying this, but Scotty Davenport would be like a safety valve local option. And I'm sure his name will come up or we'll talk about it, but I would put Beeline in that category.
Mick
Cronin is possibly the most intriguing name that I have heard in the last 36 hours that I did not expect would come up. Regional fit is good. Loves horse racing. Obviously was an assistant here, knows what it takes to win at this program, has been to Final Four now with UCLA, has things going well again there. He's shown he can recruit at a blue blood school. So it's not, he's not the Cincinnati Mick Cronin that I think he was kind of pegged as in 2014. He has clearly grown, at least in how he coaches. He's a short man. Sorry. I am too. I have no room to talk. I'm a short man as well. But his name is really intriguing. Apparently there's a big buyout and it's not entirely clear if he would want to leave this early into his UCLA tenure. But I mean, he is a Cincinnati guy. It's a regional foothold. I think he's a very interesting name this early in this whole project.
I'll say this, the buyout's only an issue with the money until it isn't. I mean, we've seen that proven over and over again.
That is
on the football side, on the basketball side. The Cronin buyout, by the way, is $8.775 million.
Okay, that's pretty high.
But here's my thing.
Maybe they negotiate.
But here's my thing.
Maybe they would negotiate it.
Once they go to California, they don't typically come back. It's nice and warm out there, and there's horse racing in LA too.
That's true. You know what? That's a fair point. All right, who else?
Ed Cooley.
Ed Cooley is a guy who has it going this year at Providence, and his name is probably going to come up for different jobs. I think he deserves to be on the list. I think he would be a more charismatic fit to this job than I think Louisville fans really know, because Providence and Louisville have not really played each other in the last 7-8 years since Louisville left the Big East. And Providence is in a very different league right now, but I think he's a good coach. I just don't know if he has enough on his resume at this point. It's a lot of NCAA tournament appearances, and that's really it. So an intriguing name, but again, he'd probably be farther down if things don't work out elsewhere.
Scotty D.
I've had him on this podcast. I love Scott Davenport. Scott Davenport has been nothing but awesome as a basketball coach at Bellarmine University here in town. For people who aren't from it, this is an IYK mention here. For people who don't know, if you don't know, you don't know. In Louisville, Scotty Davenport has built up a reputation as a guy whose teams play beautiful offense, which is true, very efficient offense. They defend hard, they play hard, and he has coached his team to a seamless transition to Division I from Division II after being a regular national title contender at the D2 level. And he was an assistant for Denny Crum and Rick Pitino in his transition year, his first year at Louisville. So he has a love for the city. He grew up here. I believe he went to Seneca High School or Iroquois High School.
I think Iroquois.
Yeah.
And then he won the title, found Houston and Ballard.
Yes. Yeah. So he's got so many, he's as Louisville as it gets. So you could do worse than Scotty Davenport. That is for sure.
I would say there's not a person that would understand the job better than Scotty D.
Probably, yes.
And he would play an entertaining style of basketball. That's for sure. Andy Enfield.
I don't think he would be on the list.
Fair enough.
Next person.
Chris Holtmann.
I think that he is a good coach. I think that he being from, I think it's Nicholasville, Kentucky, and his mom being a diehard Cats fan and him growing up as a big UK fan. This is so like, I realize how stupid this sounds.
But it's so Louisville, Kentucky. It's so,
you just can't.
Like, that's where you don't understand the rivalry if you're not from here with that.
You know, if he came out, if they hired him and
they burned all their Kentucky stuff from the house.
Right. Yeah.
Like the type of thing they'd have to do.
Because it came out after the search was over that he was on IU's radar as well, that they were interested in him. And he's a really good coach. And I think he's a fun personality. I think people like him. And certainly has the ability to win over a room. He's a sharp dresser. Not that matters. But has a little charisma about him. But yeah, he would have to straight up, like at his opening presser, say FUK, like right off the bat to win over those skeptics. There's a lot of people out there in this fan base, Jack, as you know, and we're getting deep into the message board weeds here, who are convinced that there's this massive conspiracy that at least used to rise all the way to the level of the governor, trying to take down U of L in favor of Kentucky. So there is a portion of the fan base that believes that, and that is certainly interesting.
Well, we'll go ahead and bring him up here because I think that's a natural transition. But I was hosting for the station I produce for my 9-to-5 job, ESPN Louisville. Well, I was hosting the post-game show after the Virginia game for the station on Monday night, and just on the top of how crazy and how, what's the right word, just extreme some of the people are about this. We had a caller that in the same sentence goes, "We, being Louisville, needs to bring Rick Pitino back, but we can't hire Kenny Payne because he's a traitor for working for UK." And it's like, do you all not understand that Pitino has his jersey hanging up in Rupp Arena? And it's just the rivalry just
it's
takes
incredible.
People to another level. It is incredible. But why don't you just bring up Kenny Payne right now, though? Nick's assistant, former UK assistant under Cal, of course, member of the 1986 national title team.
There is a drum beat it's a larger drum beat than previously for Kenny Payne, who is a very good coach and is well respected for his development. Did a lot of really hard and good work at UK with developing some of the best big guys in the country for year after year after year. Like, part of me is thinking like, okay, this dude won a national title with your favorite team and is still obviously great friends with all these famous guys, Purvis Ellison, all these players, Milt Wagner over the years who are Louisville through and through, and people love those guys. And then went to UK and recruited and developed the litany of guys that fans absolutely hated because they were so good. And you don't want him to be your coach. It's because of that. It's bizarre. My hang up has always been, why hasn't he been a head coach anywhere? But I don't know if that's as big of a barrier as it used to be for me. And I would certainly, I know Jeff Goodman has said this, our one of our fearless leaders here on the field of 68 has said that he would be shocked if Kenny Payne was not at least among the interviews for this job. And I'm right there with him. There's a lot of donors who like him and former players, especially. I wonder if it's the right time for something like that, but I guess it just depends on who you swing and miss on first. I'll put it this way. I think Louisville would be in good hands with Kenny Payne. I think it'd be a good hire. I think he'd be okay here. I think that Louisville would end up hiring him after missing on one or two big time college basketball names.
So like kind of what Indiana did with Mike Woodson last year.
Yes.
Where they went, except I would hopefully think they would go after more than just Brad Stevens.
Brad Stevens and then Chris Holtmann and then Mike Woodson. Yes.
Oh God, that I cannot handle another Brad Stevens coaching search. Yeah, I cannot handle the stupidity of that picking up again. I just can't do it. It was never going to happen. I can't do it. Anyways, Eric Musselman.
Eric Musselman might be the most intriguing name on this whole list. He's a flamboyant character. He is certainly one of the more eye-catching figures in college basketball as a coach. He's done a lot of wacky things, including running and jumping in the pool. I think it was when Nick Smith, a 5-star recruit, committed to Arkansas. But that last sentence there probably will perk people's ears up. You know, he's got a reputation as cultivating and culling the transfer portal to finding guys, and he still does that. But the dude can recruit. He's got 2 5-star prospects coming in at Arkansas in 2022. Would that be a hang up for him taking the Louisville job? Maybe. Like you've got this big class coming in, but I think if Louisville can sweeten the pot for him financially, I think he would take the job in a heartbeat.
Interesting. That would be an interesting one. I mean, I
think it'd be a good hire.
I like him, but I don't like him as much as some of the other top tier guys that I mentioned. Like I've been a much bigger fan of what he's done at Arkansas than what he did in Nevada. I'll just put it that way. Like I wasn't
very different programs, but fair point.
Yes. The next guy is the guy that I want, and I don't care they lost to Tom Crean on Tuesday night. And that's not
happening.
It's not happening. Oh, don't crush my soul,
dude.
Jeff.
The buyout is enormous. It's
12.57.
Yeah, you can't do that. You just paid $5 million to chase your coach away. You're going to have to probably offer, if you want to make a big time hire, you're going to have to offer a big contract. And then in addition to that, to have to pay that buyout, I've been repeatedly told that that's not happening.
The buyout only matters still doesn't, but you know this a lot better than I do, so I'm not going to argue.
It's a fair argument, but that is a lot of money for an athletics department that is not where it was a few years ago financially.
Bruce Pearl. That's been a name that's been thrown out a lot by the fan base.
Yes. Look, Bruce Pearl is obviously a huge personality. He is successful. I mean, he's clearly coaching really well at Auburn and has been in the Final Four with them. Has right now what looks to be the best team in the country. They're really fun to watch. Can recruit his butt off. It's a mix of players between transfers, a couple of maybe under the radar guys, and some big time recruits. It's a nice collection of players. And I think he would have the right personality for the Louisville job. There's 2 things that I think have to cause somewhat of a pause for Louisville. And this is purely speculation. I've heard this elsewhere with the NCAA stuff. I know everybody is talking about that. Right. I do think that is going to be a major impediment to this whole thing. If it were to ever be possibly a Bruce Pearl situation, the NCAA stuff from Tennessee and at Auburn, I think is a real problem and would probably shoot down getting a lot of people in leadership on board with that kind of hire. The second thing is, and maybe I'm wrong on this, Jack, and Louisville is a huge fan base, and I'm not trying to get political on people, but he is like a very in-your-face right-wing guy. And I don't know if, like, on social media and stuff, and that's fine. Like, you could believe whatever you want. I probably strongly disagree with him on a lot of things, but I'm just saying, when you coach in a city, it's a very different mentality than maybe coaching elsewhere. Louisville is a very different place than Auburn, Alabama, and Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, Knoxville, Tennessee, okay, maybe is a little closer to Louisville than Auburn is, but I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to pick on him. Believe whatever you want to believe. I haven't culled all of his social media to truly have like these, full form takes on what he believes. I just know that can be a turnoff to some people, and it's a place that most coaches don't go.
And I will add this also. I mean, Josh Hurd, the interim athletics director, did have a presser earlier on Wednesday, and he was point blank asked, would you hire someone that has, past NCAA issues? And that, is saying without saying Bruce Pearl. And we obviously don't know if Josh Hurd will be the guy that's making the hire because he's not the permanent AD right now. Maybe he does end up being that, maybe he doesn't. But he had the comment of, and the quote is quite literally, I want to hire, the guy with the most integrity. That was, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that is basically what he said there. So that would, to me, make it seem unlikely that, as much as, I love watching Bruce Pearl teams, they're really fun.
They are so fun.
Yes.
He is a great coach. He is an awesome coach.
Yes, I would love to go see him at synagogue for the high holidays, but at the end of the day, with where Louisville's at right now, they still haven't gotten the IRB stuff. There's been so many issues.
Yeah.
I just don't know if you can pull the trigger.
It's dicey.
Yeah.
But then so the other day when they're playing UK and it was a defensive possession and he turned to the crowd and was like trying to get them.
It's great. It's
like
great.
This dude, I don't know. Yeah, he gets it. I don't know. It's an interesting name. And I could be way off. I feel bad now. I always get a little worried that I'm gonna get like blown up for even remotely touching the politics thing, but
we have the receipt.
I feel like it's a point to bring up. It's not something that I necessarily agree with or disagree with.
Speaking of NCAA issues, someone that is near and dear to my heart, and you already know. And no, I'm not saying Tom Green. Rick Pitino. It's something that I assume will never happen, but I just had to put it on there. I know it'll never happen, but
that happened.
Just quickly though, how surprised were you that the video on the Russ Smith tribute video of Rick being on there got the response that it did?
Not surprised at all. I mean, look, I think that this fan base, and again, maybe I'm misreading this, but by and large, it's a fan base that will say, man, I miss those days with Rick Pitino coach teams. They were really fun. They were really good. And he is a heck of a coach. And he still is a heck of a coach. And his Iona teams are now very fun.
Yes.
And also he deserved to be fired. I feel like that is the majority opinion. And I know Rick says a lot of different things. And we all kind of used to joke about that. I'm sure that I have seen somewhere that he had said I kind of, not necessarily said I deserve to be fired, but basically acknowledged the situation had become untenable for him to continue. But God, I mean, I imagine if he just repels from the rafters back in Louisville. I do think I'm convinced that he will end up coaching somewhere else at a Power 6 conference, and including the Big East in basketball. I'm convinced he'll go somewhere else, but he insists that he won't.
I will say I have never heard the sound that the crowd made at any sporting event, concert, anything that they made when he popped up on that video on Saturday. It was like a positive shriek.
Yeah,
it was very
because people were not thinking.
It was
that
stunning. It was stunning. It was really surreal. Anyways, 3 more here on this to wrap up. Calvin Sampson.
A little bit older, and I believe that there's a lot of familial connection to Houston and UH where he is.
$12.4 million buyout too.
That's a big buyout. He's another excellent coach, but I would wonder if he really would want to leave.
Brad Underwood.
I don't have a great feel on him. I don't. I mean,
I like watching his teams play. That's for sure. They're fun. They're good. They
did flop in the tournament last year. And the tournament is such a crapshoot. I mean, Chris Mack's best teams would get great seeds and lose early in the tournament, and then he would show up with 20-12 Xavier and make the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. So the tournament is a relative crapshoot. But I think the mark of a coach, and people are going to be like, Jesus, Jeff, obviously, but if you make a Final Four, that is not a that is not a hot team, pulling off a bunch of upsets typically. I mean, that is a team that by the time they reach the Final Four, 9 times out of 10, I don't know what the percentage is, they have been really good all year. And then they've reached the promised land of college basketball. If you're a mid-major or smaller coach of a mid-major or smaller type school, making the tournament year in and year out, maybe getting an upset, that's kind of your ceiling. And then you get a bigger job if that's your goal in life. But when you're at that level, you've got to have some sign that you can take a really good team and play through the tournament and win games and sustain that success. And Brad Underwood does not have that to his name. So
you can say the same. You can say the same about Holtman, though.
I know. Yeah, that is definitely a detriment to Holtman. It's a detriment to Ed Cooley. It's a detriment to Matt Painter. I don't know if we're going to get to him. There's a few guys on there who you're kind of like, well, they've had some really good teams and they just haven't gotten over that hump. Doesn't make them bad coaches, but I feel like Louisville to start should really be swinging for the fences. I think they've got a lot of time to do that.
Yeah. All right. So fair enough. So 2 more now because I need to add Matt Painter onto this list. So we'll start with Matt Painter. Yes, Matt Painter for sure. That is a mistake on my part to not have him on there.
Yeah. Purdue is his alma mater, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't ever see him leaving Purdue. Personally.
Yeah. I think he's a lifer there, but he has, I think it was, I've read so many coaching search stories and had all these different text message exchanges that this is all conflated. So whoever I'm stealing this from, I'm sorry. But he flirted with the Missouri job at one point, didn't he? I feel like he has flirted with jobs before and had his name or his name has come up in the past. And people mentioned him to me back in 2018 when I was starting to cover the coaching search that produced Chris Mack. And I think he's a good coach. I think the reaction on the message boards and stuff is really weird. Purdue is good and he is a really good coach. But I think a lot of people see them playing a style that is too familiar to, or too similar to Mac. And I think people want something more exciting.
Purdue this year is kind of an outlier with that, but Purdue, I just feel like he's always very under the radar. And Painter fits that very well. And I don't know. I don't think Louisville likes that. They like, they like to be kind of the loud in your face person.
They want to be the number one team in the country. Like they want to be in the top 5 every year. That is what Louisville fans want.
Yeah. Last one, Kevin Willard.
Okay. That's another interesting name. And obviously has the local connection, is really close to Pitino, has told people a lot in the past. I've always heard these anecdotes about how much he loved his time here and enjoyed his time here. And I think is a really good coach. He strikes me again, like, so my initial thought process here is like Louisville should try to call Scott Drew. They should try to call Mick Cronin. They should see about some of the names like that. And I think, of course, a big factor in all of this is who is the point person on this. Is it a search firm leading the way and producing candidates for you? Is it an AD who you've empowered and Josh Hurd, who's the interim right now? Is it a committee? Is it like the ULAA? I don't know who's running this. And that's why it's sort of an interesting caveat to throw in, context to throw in all of this. But I would not be surprised if Kevin Willard was among those names as like, okay, they swung big and now we're down to like 4 interviews and we're going to talk to Kenny Payne. We're going to talk to Kevin Willard. We're going to talk to like Eric Musselman and we're going to talk to Ed Cooley or, something along that. Like I could see that scenario. A couple other names that I would just throw in there as intriguing names who have come up in some way, shape, or form. Danny Hurley.
Yeah, I'm about to say a little different.
Dan Hurley, coaching UConn, who is a really good coach there. Of course, that would potentially mean that Luke Murray would then come back to Florida.
Hey, you get Bill Murray back.
Know. Yeah, you never know. I think Mike Boynton is an interesting guy.
Yes, I like him a lot.
Strong young coach. Who really won a lot of plaudits for the way he carried himself through the NCAA stuff, which is relevant to Louisville. and how they handle themselves. And he landed the type of recruit that Louisville fans are like foaming at the mouth for their program to land in the last like 10 years. I know they had at points, but never quite in the last like 5-10 years have they been landing that level of recruit in Cade Cunningham. And then there's a couple other guys who I would throw into the mix. I'm just thinking of some different names, but like
I really like Mike Boyd. I think he's a guy that's an up and comer, but
yeah,
I just don't know if that's exciting enough for.
That's the thing. It's like
I find him entertaining. Obviously, Cade Cunningham last year, that team was super fun to watch.
Yeah,
I just don't
know. But people here are going to be like, "Who is that?"
And who the hell is this guy from Stillwater?
Right, and that's somewhat on them because
right.
I think if you're Louisville, you've got to make a hire that is going to replenish the energy in the program. And to his credit, Chris Mack, when they hired him, did a lot of things right in the first like year or so with the recruiting stuff. He wore the old Louisville, the black jacket. Louisville Live was a big thing. And I know there were other creative forces that were involved there. I think Luke Murray, I don't think people quite grasped how important he was to the recruiting stuff that Louisville was doing and the innovative things that Louisville was doing to try to get kids in. So you need to have someone to bring in juice like that. And I like Mike Boynton. Does he have a Final Four? No, but Mike Boynton would bring juice like that. Like he would get that kind of fire going at Louisville. Again, no clue on him. If I've heard that he has a big buyout. And then there's a couple other names that I should just throw in there. I think Steve Forbes has been really exciting at Wake Forest for people. He only just got there. So he's only in season 2, but he's got Wake Forest rocking. They should be a tournament team. And he has a lot of people in coaching circles and in college basketball circles really like Steve Forbes and have known him for a long time from his work on the JUCO level as well. And is a very, very good coach. And Wes Miller is another interesting one. Just in year 1 at Cincinnati has things going there. But again, you do have to make the assessment of like, if he's good here and Hubert Davis fails in like 5 years,
he's going.
He's going. Of course he is. But at the same time, you can't make a hire like that
right.
because you kind of have to make the right hire at the right time. But I do think that that would probably at least be on someone's mind. So it is funny though, Jack, because it's like, you don't have Kentucky hiring Memphis coach John Calipari. Like there's just not guys like that right now. You don't have like Billy Donovan is not going to coach college basketball. Brad Stevens is not going to coach college basketball. If he was ever going to, it would have been the IU job. And clearly he was not interested.
He's a masshole now, Jeff.
He's become a masshole. But like, there's just so few of the, like Jay Wright.
No.
Look, it's probably not going to happen, right? It's almost
Mark Few's not happening.
Mark Few's not happening. So you really you're narrowing that pool of coaches. But like Scott Drew has, Jeff Goodman was talking about this. Has anyone really gone after Scott Drew to try to get him here? I know he's got NCAA stuff too that people would possibly point to, but he just won a national championship and Baylor is once again one of the best teams in the country. And he can recruit, he gets transfers. He's a really good coach. He has a long, long history of NCAA tournament success, and is from Indiana. So, yeah. I think that guy, I think between him and Mick Cronin, you could go after 2 really good coaches and possibly get one of them. But again, I mean, as of right now, so that people don't call me some crazy person, this is what I would say. We're at the point now, and it's probably already been happening. Nobody is talking directly to coaches. And I saw a tweet the other day, dismissing my guy, Dom Yates, about, oh, you don't have direct contact. Of course you don't have direct contact to a coach about their interest in a job. That you hear about this stuff from agents. These are the people who are talking right now. Does it all pan out? No, a lot of it doesn't. But the conversations about who's interested and who's not, those are usually coming from reliable places who know who's looking around, who thinks that maybe they could get a bigger salary at the place that they're working. You're not like, no reporter is calling up Bruce Pearl and directly being like, do you want the Louisville job? That's not how it works. And it was an odd attack. So that's a random aside. And I'll probably have you cut that out later, Jack. And if not, it's fine. But this is where the rumblings start in this type of search. This is where the rumblings start. You hear from agents talk to other people. College basketball reporters are very much involved on the national level of finding out names and things. I mean, the wheels are turning right now to the point where, I will give you an example. Everyone under the sun knew that Chris Mack was the number one choice at Louisville and that Chris Mack wanted to coach Louisville.
Did you know his wife was from here?
And his wife was from here. Everyone knew that, but they didn't actually sit down and talk to Chris Mack until March. Like, it was after everything happened. They did not actually do that. But leading up to that, of course, there were intermediaries getting involved. That's how this stuff works. To act like it's like the school calling the coach right away and in January and starting the conversation, I'm sure that has happened, but that is not how this works. We're talking about intermediaries, agents getting involved in all this stuff and trying to see if they can get in at places. So to suggest that this is not going to be like that is ludicrous and really bizarre. There's a lot of good coaches, Jack. I will tell Louisville fans, there are a lot of good coaches who would at least be intrigued by the job. They know what it is. Are there issues? Yes. Can it be toxic at times in the fan base? Yes, quite frankly, it can. I'm not blaming the fans for that. The conditions have increased to that point, but there is a lot of toxicity right now surrounding the basketball program, and you've got to come into it knowing that. And I don't think Chris Mack fully grasped how significant that was when he came in here. And it's gotten worse now. So whoever comes in to replace him is going to have to be someone who has a handle on, I've got to be able to come in here and establish what I want to do and establish control and rein that back in a little bit.
And it'll be a place where you got to win. It all goes back to that.
And ultimately
you got to win. And it'll be interesting to see, what happens with the IRP. Does Louisville get, a postseason ban? How much that handcuff things? Mm-hmm. And also the fact that we don't know who's actually going to be hiring the coach either. Will play a big role in it as well. Yeah,
we don't know. If it's Josh Hurd, then it's like, okay, does he rely on Jay Wright to help him and ask for his opinion on coaches? Does he know people from his time there? Does he have contacts from his previous work at Louisville for Tom Jurich? I don't know. So we're all kind of waiting to see. But I do think it was interesting that they went ahead and were willing to make a decision like this on Mac. And Hurd was the guy who was out front on it. So it does set up a really intriguing situation. And, we'll have to see if the AD is hired before the president of the university. That at least puts you in position then, if they can do it quickly, to go be competitive in the coaching market in March and April.
Yes, I think that's something they need to do. Whether it's Hurd or not, they need to have
it's got to be
someone in place, because it is extremely hard to hire someone. I would think, you like to take a business perspective out of it. You're not going to go and work for a company that doesn't have a CEO, right? I mean, you want to know who your boss is and who you're going to be working for. That's just common sense.
100%. So we'll see where it goes. But I think it's going to be, I absolutely positively love coaching carousel stuff. I love it. I love trying to figure out who's in where and who's trying to get in where. I had so much fun covering the Louisville search a few years ago. I was extremely You should have seen how giddy I was running to my computer when I broke the news that Louisville was going up to interview Chris Mack, and we had that first. I was really proud of that. Of course, every national writer in the country who covers college basketball all tweeted at the same time that Mack had accepted the job. So, it was a little different then, but that interview, that was a big scoop. And I'm very excited to see where the scoops come from coming up, how many interviews there are. This is a much more wide open, I would think, search than that one was.
And I think it's good that it is because
because
that's a thing where
everyone
assumed it would be Chris Mack for 10 months and then Chris Mack didn't work out. So I think it's good to just keep an open mind and there's a lot of possibilities and you want to take your time and hire the best guy.
Yeah. And look, if I'm Louisville, I would love to hear Kenny Payne's plan. Like, what would your plan be coming here? How would you engage the fan base? Who would you have on your staff, which I think would be a big part of all of this for him. If you're talking about some of these younger, not necessarily younger guys, but guys who aren't as proven necessarily as like a Mick Cronin or Scott Drew, you say, what's your plan to be reaching your first Final Four when you come to Louisville? You really have to shake out as much as you can and see what comes out and see where you can go. A lot of those guys I think would be good hires for Louisville. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to see where this thing goes over the next, 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun ride. I can't wait to go along.
Love it. I love it. All right, buddy. Well, I think we covered a lot of bases.
Yes.
We said we would do a half hour, and I think we've gone like an hour and 15 minutes. But I think this is exactly what people want to talk about. And I hope that I'm shooting my mouth off and horribly wrong in a lot of these places. And because you know what? I love the chaos, and I'm here for it. So we'll see. We'll see what names come up. I saw, there's one other name that we would throw out there, Jack, by the way.
Oh,
and it was one that I was kind of perked me up, but I don't think that it would ever really materialize because you should be able to get either Kenny Payne, who's a college guy, but also an NBA guy, or a college coach.
Is it Wes Unseld Jr.?
Wes Unseld Jr. He did not grow up in Louisville. The only connection he has is obviously his dad is like
pretty big connection though.
just an absolute hoover of a rebounder, an incredible player. Your favorite Louisville player's favorite Louisville player. Like Wes Unseld is an absolute legend, obviously. And Wes Unseld Jr. is 46, and I don't know. He's got the Wizards playing well.
Yeah, but he never coached in college though. That's always. Yes, I know that was my biggest thing.
There's Juwan Howard. Yeah, and it's like it's the same with Kenny. It's the same with Kenny Payne. It's like, well, he's never been a head coach.
I mean, at least Kenny Payne, those been an assistant at.
He was the number
Kentucky,
2. He was the right hand man for John Calipari.
Yeah.
When Kentucky was doing the things that modern Kentucky fans now, between the Pitino run and the Calipari run,
is the gold standard.
It's the gold standard, yes. And Kenny Payne was right in the middle of all of that. So he's. I think he deserves a fair shake. I've been on ESPN Louisville's airwaves in the past, mentioning how I regretted how dismissive I was of that whole thing in 2018. And it was just because as a beat reporter, I knew that Chris Mack was the guy. And I really just thought any other name was just wasting our time because I knew what was going to happen. And I feel in retrospect, a little embarrassed I was a little dismissive of the whole situation, and I should have approached it a little more delicately and a little bit more, I don't want to say fairly, because I think I'm always fair. But I wish I had approached it a little differently. So,
Chris Mack was always going to be the guy.
Yeah. So I just waved off. I had heard about Shaka Smart. I had heard all these other names, and Kenny Payne was always brought up. But now I think he deserves to have a conversation if he wants to. We don't even know if he will want to. But I think you got to give him a call and say, if you're interested, we'd love to talk to you. Come here, or we'll meet you somewhere with a plan for what you want to do with this program and how you want to connect it to its past, but also extend into the future and bring some juice back to the program. So There's a lot of guys who I think they should kick the tires on, and at the end of it, see where you go with it. Maybe they end up with 10 people that they like and they get one out of that. I don't know. So fascinating stuff to play out, Jack. And that's what makes us all so love the college coaching carousel.